will talk about further resources, links to those. And then I'm going to pass over to Natalie from Essex County Council, who's going to share her insights from a 3-month project that they've been working on around duty of care. So just to be clear before we get started, this is focused on resident fly tipping. So the focus is on black bag waste and household items, so bulky waste items that residents fly tipped. And the reason is that this project came about from some work done by Bryony from Recap, who are the marketing communications team within the Cambridge and Peterborough council partnerships. And they wanted to look very specifically at these behaviours. Criminal activity is fly tipping is different, and they wanted to focus on residents where they felt they might have more impact. So with the project that I'm going to talk about, what they did was went to look for funding, and they got funding actually from Innovate UK, because what they wanted to do was something around behavioural science and behaviour change, and understand what were the behavioural messages for signs that they could deploy to be impactful. So they managed to get funding, and they came to me and said, OK, Livvy, we want to know what signs are going to work. And from my background in behavioural science, I said, hang on a minute, Bryony, I think we actually need to understand what are the barriers to people doing those right behaviours, as well as what are those motivators for people fly tipping. And then we want to think about what are the solutions to those. Now, signs may be a part of that, but they're probably not the only thing. And that is how the project came about, and that's how it developed. So the fly tipping solutions package was designed specifically for enforcement officers, busy people who are out on the ground who need things that they can just refer to quickly. For elected members who often come with ideas that maybe aren't the best ones, or things that are grounded in their own kind of concerns around residents being kept happy. And for communications teams who need to be able to communicate the solutions or the ways of approaching this. And what we were trying to do is avoid people falling into the traps that other councils have already fallen into. So we wanted to learn from the mistakes of other people. And so the guide is a research around what other councils have been doing. And the way we presented this was as part of a workshop. So rather than just a guide that would live, in people's virtual kind of bookshelf of other guides, Bryony from the Recap team was very keen that this was something that was physical, that people got to experience. And that's what we did. So we ran a workshop with the enforcement officers, elected members and comms teams within Cambridge and Peterborough. And as a follow-on from that, we had someone from the Environment Agency there, Peter, and he was talking to Essex, who were also planning a fly tipping campaign at the beginning of this year. And he said, well, there's been work already done. Why don't you talk to Bryony and to Livvy and see whether this, the workshop and the guide would be useful to your members and your teams. So we rolled it out to them in January. And Natalie, as I said, will talk about the work that they've been doing. But as a consequence of this guide, the team in Peterborough have been trialling out some of the methods that have been shared. So they've been using under investigation stickers and tape. They've been using stencils, and the recycling team have been doing door knocking in social housing to address side waste. And I'll talk more about these initiatives and the efficacy as we go through the slides. So that's a bit around the background to how this project came about. Now I'm going to share with you the insights and the learnings. So as I mentioned before, we had to start with the why. What's going on? Because in order to come up with solutions, we need to come up with solutions for the problems, not just kind of educating people or explaining or telling people that they've done something wrong. So what we learnt when we did the literature review was that people were potentially fly tipping because they weren't aware of what fly tipping actually is. So many people don't know that leaving things out for their neighbours is actually fly tipping. Many people don't think it's problematic to be leaving things for other people to collect. So they might see a benefit in it. Equally with things like green garden waste, they may think that dumping it somewhere, oh, well, it's good for the nature. There are obviously those people who lack concern because they've got other things going on in their lives. Many people are not deterred by fines, and with the fine increase that's happened, it really might not be effective because actually people don't think they get caught. Obviously, there is the ease of fly tipping, and this is a big challenge because it's very easy just to put things outside. And it's even easier if the council seem to come and collect it within an hour, within a day. Why are you going to go through the effort of having to dispose of it properly? So we also wanted to understand what were the barriers to legitimate disposal. And what we found out is that knowledge was a barrier. So people believed that side waste would get collected, or if you leave things out, the bulky waste team come and collect things. There's often a lack of recycling collection knowledge or understanding of recycling. And motivation. So if the bins haven't been collected, if people's recycling bins don't get collected because they're contaminated, people will just start to put things in other places. And also, if people don't see their neighbours doing it, so social influences, people are going to be less inclined to take out those behaviours. And accessibility. So for people in HMOs, quite often the bins aren't suitable for the space that they live in. Quite often people in HMO flats don't have their own bins. So there's challenges with infrastructure. Furthermore, if we look at things like bulky waste and charity services, what we found was that people were unaware these services existed. People lacked the motivation to go to the HRWCs within opening times. Maybe it wasn't practicable because of the lifestyle they lived. The delays for collections were often off-putting because people want things gone immediately. And charities are often very selective, especially with new laws coming in, like the POPs laws and the requirement for fire retardant on materials, on furniture. And again, accessibility. So people having difficulty making bookings, do people have computers to make an online booking? Do they feel confident phoning up and speaking English if it's not their first language? And what about those items like beds? What about HMOs that are riddled with problems, mold, bed bugs? What's going to happen with those items? So we also looked at what the barriers were for lower socioeconomic groups, and so these were things like transportation, language barriers, cultural issues, income. So people didn't have money to invest in a bulky waste collection. And they often maybe lacked the time working, long hours, shift work, 6 days a week. The household structure, so who was living there, how they're living, HMOs, the different types of houses that were available, and people being very transient. So people not being connected to the area, not feeling embedded with it or concerned about what happens. And things like internet access. As I mentioned, if to book a service, you need these things. And a relationship with the council. So if there's a lack of trust, people may be less inclined to care or be concerned. There's also things about trust issues. So depending on people's relationships with councils, where they're living, the type of housing. Sorry, bad news for any of you who work with the council, but these are things that will be playing out. And then the relationship with the landlord. So many people put the onus on the landlord to be providing them with all the information, all the infrastructure. So if the landlords aren't providing that information to people, people aren't going to have it. So we've talked about the barriers. Let's move on to the solutions, because I'm sure you are all aware of those things. But it's really important when you're thinking about solutions to be clear, what do you need to be addressing? Is it a language barrier, or is it a time constraint? Is it that people are expecting their landlord to have the information, or is it that they just don't, they don't feel invested in their local community, so they don't want to keep the area looking nice and tidy? So let's talk about the solutions. And again, this was done through desk-based research, looking at literature, looking at what resources are already out there, as well as having interviews with councils, and then talking through with Peterborough. So we had a kind of steering group from the Peterborough and Cambridgeshire group, and we shared with them insights that we'd found, and people then started implementing those so we could see what was working and what wasn't. So when I go through this now, I'm going to be sharing insights from different research projects and what has worked in the Cambridge and Peterborough area. So when we put the guide together, thinking about who's going to be using it, so you guys are enforcement officers who are very busy, we've made this quick reference. This isn't the long reports that we went through. It's not something from the fly tipping prevention organisation. Those things are already out there. What we've done is packaged it up in a way that it's quick and easy to understand. So we've got a traffic light system, so you can see what's a quick and cheap initiative or something to proceed with caution. So if someone comes to you and says, oh, we've got this great idea, we could do this, so you can look in the guide. Well, Livvy and the team say proceed with caution. We also used behavioural science in there, so that you can check things and see what it's activating, what kind of behavioural mechanisms. And we used the EAST model, so what's easy, attractive, social and timely. And you'll see some of these icons appearing on the slides as we go through. Going to be getting access to the guide, which has got, so there's a summary guide, and this has got the traffic light system, the summary of all these initiatives and the challenges. So we're going to start off with enforcement, and one of the things that came out from the research we did was an initiative for court fines. So the Behavioural Insights team trialled for different text messages for fines, and what they found is that just by including someone's name, there was a 33% increase in people paying fines. So Fenland District Council tried this, and they had 12 messages sent out, and of those 9 people paid their fly tipping, that initial fine for fly tipping. And another one, similar but different, Durham have a littering awareness course. So 26% of people, so people who got fined, caught, had the option to pay the fine or do the course. And they found 26% of people had done it and 34% of people had paid the full amount. So we haven't had anyone yet do a fly tipping education course, but something to consider. And when we're talking about enforcement, these are things to avoid or proceed with caution. So we've got fine messaging. So throughout the research, threats of fines do not reduce antisocial behaviour. So proceed with caution with that. Also, witness reward schemes. So Wiltshire offered people money if they reported people. And what they found is that the people who did report them didn't know about the scheme. So we think that money motivates people. Behavioural science says otherwise, and so do the case studies. Now, something else that quite a few councils had done was a wall of shame, which is videos of the footage of people fly tipping, and this they were using to ask people for reports. Now, again, this comes in the proceed with caution section, because it only really works if you've got a good following on your YouTube channel or on your website or on your Facebook page. But if you haven't, then people aren't going to see it and it won't be effective. So those are the enforcement things. These are just some snippets. There are lots more in the guide. So we're going to move on to street scene infrastructure. And this covers quite a few different things, including bins, and my favourite word, binfrastructure. So a good example of how changing the binfrastructure improved recycling and reduced contamination, and also reduced fly tipping and examples of side waste, is by making the bins better. So making them more colourful, cleaning them, giving them reduced aperture so people can't put the wrong things in them. And the example from London had really positive results. And again, so at the moment, Peterborough have been changing the bin apertures, and they found that this has really helped with side waste alongside an education programme. Keep Britain Tidy changed on-street binfrastructure and put in these bins for waste that was coming out of shops. So rather than shops piling up the waste at the end of the night and everyone else piling on top of it, they had these bins that then could be collected. So this also achieved a reduction in waste. Another example of street scene infrastructure is target hardening, which can take on many different forms. This is an example of it with beautification. So using wooden street planters, and this across all the research shows a reduction in fly tipping in those areas. And in Peterborough, before these beds were just wood chip, and they had other areas that were just wood chip. People fly tip them. By putting in these colourful planters, people stopped fly tipping them. Same space, they just changed it, and it was the community that had actually put these in. So you can see just at the bottom there, I've got the flower to show this is a way of making things more attractive, and this is an effective campaign that requires investment. So here's one to be mindful of when you're thinking about beautifying your bins or changing what your bins look like. So the Ogilvy team worked with Westminster Council, and they trialled floral bins versus bins with monsters' faces on them. Now, the floral bins actually increased side waste. People were putting their bin bags where the poppies were, and the monsters' faces actually decreased them. And this is probably something to do with eyes, and we'll talk about eyes at the moment, and things being more playful and fun. And another example of where things have been situation dependent. So in Greenwich, another Ogilvy initiative, they put babies' faces on shutters to address antisocial behaviour. Croydon tried the same for fly tipping, and they got the community to paint murals. And this did work in the area where they put it, but the fly tipping got displaced. So again, this shows where you've got to trial and test things. So services and events, these are, an important thing to engage people. So things like free skip days, lots of people do these. In Richmond, they found there was an 11% reduction in fly tipping, but they did have seasonal upturns. So it's again thinking about what else is going on for people. When are they clearing things out? When is the right time to be doing them? In Sheffield, after they'd had an ineffective one, they then went round and did door knocking for the Slovak community, because they realised that the people who English wasn't their first language, they weren't on their Facebook group, they weren't reading the local newspaper, and they weren't seeing those announcements where they usually are. So door knocking really helped. Community cleanup days. So Cambridge did one of these where actually they included not just the getting rid of things, they had a take it or leave it stall, so people could then do reuse and kind of bring and share. They also had recycling and general waste sorting skips, so it wasn't just everything in one skip. And then Fenland did an initiative where they asked residents to actually come and see them clear out a huge dumping site, which was a lay-by. And as a consequence to that, what they found was that people were much more likely to report things to the council because they'd seen the council were committed to making those changes. But we have to, here's some be aware. What are the avoids or the proceed with caution? So free bulky waste services may seem like a good idea. Fife Council have found otherwise. What they've found is that they have had more waste collections, but the fly tipping has persisted and the professional fly tippers are now using the service. So again, this is where you've got to understand what is the root cause of the fly tipping and how can you address that? And talking to Sandy Anderson there, he was saying one of the challenges is that it's small businesses who actually need access to the HRWC for disposing of things like garden waste and other materials. So it's really important to understand what's the root cause. And then also putting on things like recycling only education days. So Peterborough did one where they just put on a recycling day. Hardly anyone from the local community attended. But when they go and do supermarket stands or collaborate with the local community groups and go to events that are already on, it's working much better for them. So again, think about who your audience is, think about what people care about, what's important to them, and think about that, because recycling may not be, probably isn't the top of the priority for your kind of inner city, lower socioeconomic groups. So for all the comms teams here, this bit is for you. What can you do with your communications? And obviously, most of these things need to be done in collaboration. So great example here of a restructure of a bulky waste page. So what Liverpool Council have done is, rather than putting the collection first of all, they have put the reuse and recycling options at the top, and at the bottom then you've got the bulky waste collections. Manchester have written the page completely differently, and it says something like need to get rid of something, need to get rid of some stuff. So they've written it in everyday language. So again, it's more accessible. Another good example for the everyday language piece is the Rootware website widget. So with this, people can type in a very funny word for search, the search terminology that they would look for. So like, need to get rid of a sofa, and it will pop up with the most relevant answers. So this is a good one. It also tells people when their upcoming recycling days are, skip days, etc. With your online communications, so for your social media, what you want to be focusing on is that people are being caught. So too many people think that no one gets caught, you can get away with it. So think about highlighting people that have been caught. So this example here from Leicestershire Waste Partnership there's a whole set of materials for that. Essex used the scrap resources from Hertfordshire Council, which again reinforce that idea that people are getting caught. And Huntingdonshire, this is a post from their Facebook page, which says that they actually successfully prosecuted somebody. So they're reinforcing the prosecution. I think they've even put their name on there as well. So anything that reinforces that people are being caught, as well, of course, of duty of care comms, which Natalie will talk about shortly. And then direct communications. So door knocking. This is generally probably an more cost heavy option, but can be very effective. So Peterborough are having really good results from this, where they're doing this in social housing. In a test, in a trial that was done in Portsmouth, they trialled door knocking, rewards, and this card, which they put through people's doors to tell people what they had done properly and where they'd made some mistakes. So there's to let people know what they could and couldn't recycle. And what they found was that the card, this just with the information on it, was as effective as a reward scheme and more effective than door knocking in isolation. So just giving people feedback can be really effective. And another example of the feedback are these oops tags. So this is actually from America, but bin tags are being done by councils around the country here. So obviously it does involve your recycling operatives kind of doing some things, but it's telling people what they've done right as well as what they've done wrong. So it's really important that we actually, reinforce the desirable behaviours. And again, we can see here at the top, we've got the example of it being an effective campaign, but it does require some investment. So on-street communications. So we want to be communicating at those moments where things are happening. So here's some examples. I don't have any stats for this, but council, Hillsborough, I think it was Hillsborough, or Middlesbrough, one of those. It was one that's not spelt borough, it's spelt bruh. So they they impounded a vehicle that had been used for fly tipping and rebranded it and put it all around the town, showing that someone had been evicted. No, not evicted, been charged. They had been prosecuted and the van had been impounded, and that this has got a kind of a duty of care message on it and lots of other things. They're using the eyes, which we'll talk about in a minute, the you're being watched. So another example we've got here on the right, we've got the fly tipping tape and the stencils, and this was done by Keep Britain Tidy in Newham. And what they found was this did lead to 64 to 67% reduction. They couldn't keep doing those things in one place. They had to move it around. So they changed the messages and kept cycling the different comms, because they found that after a while, people became immune to it. The final example on here on the right is from Bristol City Council. And these signs, again, so they're using the scrap logos and the colours and the colour scheme, and they put these on lampposts. They found they worked well in some places. So in one location, it went from 7 to 12 times a month to 2 to 3 times a month. But in one location, they found it was ineffective, and this was a very long street. So they found this worked best in residential, shorter kind of cul-de-sac areas. But long streets where you've got shops, where you've got flats above above shops, where you've got other things going on, they weren't effective because you've got different pressures and different types of fly tipping. So that's one to be aware of. So on-street campaigns, so kind of some messaging that has been shown to be effective is the eyes. So we behave differently if we think we're being watched. And in a dog fouling campaign, Keep Britain Tidy tried this, and they tried the eyes with different messages, and they find that "we are watching you" was more effective than the threat of the fine, and so just the eyes on their own. And so that's been adopted in lots of different fly tipping campaigns as well. So the avoids or proceeds with caution, telling people off. Nobody wants to be told what to do, so come at it from a different way. Reinforce what people need to do, so explaining how to do duty of care. Avoid using words that people don't understand. So the scrap messaging has got this: fly tipping is the illegal dumping of items. So they're explaining what that is. It can be as small as a single bag to an entire truckload of rubbish. It's like everyday language. Bulky waste. Say mattresses and fridges, or furniture and white goods. Be as prescriptive as possible. Don't focus on how many people are fly tipping or all the fly tipping that's happening, because this will reinforce and normalise the behaviour. We actually want to focus on people who aren't doing it. So in another example, in Loo, where there was a littering campaign, they trialled this: 1 out of 10 people litter. It increased littering because they're talking about the undesirable behaviour. So instead, we want to be talking about the desirable behaviour. So X amount of people this month have called the bulky waste service. So this is my whistle-stop tour of the research and the insights. There's lots more examples under each of the categories that we've just gone through. And you can access the guide yourself. We'll put a link, once I stop talking, I'll put a link to the website. So you can download the summary guide. If you want the full guide with all the resources, it comes as part of the Fly Tipping Solutions package, and you can book a call to discuss that. And Brian and I will go through what's involved and if it's the right fit for you and your team. If you want a free taster of it, and you particularly are working on social housing, Metro Store have funded us to run a session for you on May the 15th, and we will go through a more interactive session on how you can approach solutions for social housing estates. And a link will go in the chat for that, I believe. And as I know, we all know the most important thing for you guys is funding. So as Bryony couldn't be here, I asked her to let me know where she would recommend looking for funding options, either for these services or to trial things. So she recommended the Police and Crime Commissioner funds, crime prevention funds, Tesco community cleanup pots, and getting to your elected members first as when they come in and asking for their budgets. So the idea with this, the solutions we're offering, they're tried and tested. You do need to trial them to see if they work in your local area, but these are more than just, something that's being done on a whim. So with that in mind, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to pass over to Natalie to share her campaign that they've been working on in Essex for the last 3 months.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name's Natalie. I work at Essex County Council. I'm one of the senior circular economy officers in our kind of environment and climate team. I'm going to run through this quite quickly because I know there's time for questions at the end, but please feel free to put anything in the chat if you want to. So yeah, thank you. So we've been coordinating a county-wide fly tipping reduction campaign, ultimately with the aim to reduce incidents and impacts of fly tipping across the county. This was kind of in line with our new waste strategy for Essex, so our 30-year waste strategy. Initially, fly tipping wasn't part of our waste strategy, but it's very popular, let's say, with members because it's popular with residents. If there's going to be something that residents complain about, it's going to be potholes and fly tipping. So it made its way into the waste strategy, which is why we chose to do a campaign on it. So essentially, the main aims of the campaign, you can see some of those on the screen, but it was basically around education of what fly tipping is, what the impacts are, what individuals' duty of care is, and then we wanted to offer an alternative solution for how to dispose of waste. We know that if you want a behaviour change campaign to be successful, you need to make the right behaviour the most easy thing to do. So we ended up partnering with another organisation called Love Junk, who provide an online marketplace basically for you to find licensed and vetted waste collectors. A lot of them, the collections will be done for free if they're kind of reusable. So we wanted to offer an alternative option as well as kind of council bulky waste services and things like that. So we pulled together a working group of the local councils who wanted to be involved in the project. We've got 12 district, borough and city councils in Essex. 9 of them signed up to be part of the project, so it's become a lot bigger than we thought it was going to be. But that's great because it's essentially been almost fully county-wide. And we held monthly meetings with them to go through, kind of keep them in line with the project and what was happening, so that we had full buy-in from those councils from the start and they felt ownership and kind of that they were, inputting into the overall campaign. So the tools that we use, so we, as Livvy mentioned, we chose to use the Scrap fly tipping campaign, which is from Hertfordshire Waste Partnership. They set that up. It was recommended to us by a contact who had seen it used really well in Lincolnshire. It's an off-the-shelf set of designs and assets that you kind of use and you tailor to your messaging, and you put your logos and your URLs, etc., but you keep all the branding the same. The assets have been used in over 200 councils now, I think. So it's beginning to become essentially a nationwide campaign, which is very recognisable. You may have seen it in your areas wherever you are. But there's a huge array of assets in there, so it works really well for different areas who have different kind of target areas that they want to kind of focus on. So whether that's a different tone of messaging or locations or different hotspots, kind of the makeup, whether it's rural, urban, that sort of thing, it's really good for that. We also chose to do a launch event, so we put in contact with Bryony and Livvy, and they agreed to host a launch event for us. So we got all of the working group there with their enforcement officers, members and councillors all in one room together to launch the event. So we had press there, some interviews. It was a room of maybe 60 or 70 people, all there to understand what the project was. And ultimately then Livvy facilitated a workshop where we had each council make a commitment to what they were going to deliver in the campaign period. So it's only a 3-month live campaign, but they were asked to come up with a commitment to what they would produce. So whether that was they would update their website, they would put specific signage in hotspot areas to target those different things, and they had to give us a commitment that we can now go back to them at the end of the project and say, what did you deliver on? How did it work? So our campaign doesn't finish until the end of this month, and then at the end of May we will have a kind of summary working group meeting where everybody will feed back on their commitments and how it's gone and what's worked well so far. But I do know that Basildon has chosen to put big banners in their hotspot areas, and from a particularly like fly tipping heavy area, they've had no fly tips since. So how long that will continue for, because obviously we can get a bit blind to signage, we don't know, but at least for the initial period it's worked really well, and they don't seem to have had a problem with displacement into other areas, which is really positive to see. Key learnings, I would say, from the campaign so far. So because the scrap assets are so wide and so varied, they cover all sorts. So they cover duty of care, they cover prosecutions, they cover alternative options and what you can do with waste. We chose to sit down with each council and really understand what their residents would want from the messaging and what they would respond to. So some councils wanted quite a hardline messaging because they'd done lots of softly before and it hadn't worked, and now they were like, no, we need to talk about how you can get prosecuted for this. And other councils, it was just the start of their campaign, so they wanted more of an educational focus, and it allowed the option for us to be really varied in what messaging we targeted in each area. Again, because there's so many assets, I would suggest if you use something like an off-the-shelf campaign like this, that you choose the assets that you want to use early. There are so many, and we made the mistake of choosing too many and then localizing them all. So we gave individual logos to each asset. So times each asset by 9, and then we must have had over 100 assets that we used across social media and physical. It just became too much. So I would suggest either pick a small amount of key messaging that you localize, because actually residents don't want to always hear from the county because it's too high up. They want to know that their district council or their local council is involved in the project, or this messaging is coming from more local than high up. Or you keep things quite generic, so you use the same messaging for everybody but you don't localize it. Again, printing can take a really long time because we had so many versions of every asset. Printing just took a really long time and it was expensive. So again, I would just be aware of what assets you use and where you use them. Engage with the media agency early. So we chose to do both physical assets, so the banners, roller banners, posters, bin stickers, all that sort of stuff, and we did a digital campaign. So we did that ourselves through our own social media channels and the local council channels, but we also procured a media agency to run a paid campaign for us for 1 month. So that was brilliant. And we've had over 5 million impressions on the all of the assets that they've put out on that campaign, which has been brilliant to see. So for a kind of a awareness raising piece, that's really positive. But I would say we probably did it the wrong way round. So we chose the assets and then went to the agency and said, can you put these places? And actually what we should have done is procure the media agency and say, what do you think would work best in each of these areas, given the target audiences they want, given the messages they want? How can we best use these assets that we have to target these audiences? Because actually a good media agency, a marketing company, should be able to tell you what works best in different areas, particularly if they're kind of local to your kind of where you are. And then again, local council engagement is really crucial. So we had the working group running every month. They were engaged from the start, and that meant that they bought into the campaign. And then at the launch event, those enforcement officers felt like they had a bit of ownership. They'd had a say in what they wanted to deliver in their area, which meant that that they, when it comes to the end of our project and we have the kind of summary meeting, everyone will have delivered because they felt a sense of ownership of the project. And then very lastly, to get the comms teams involved, I put together a comms toolkit with everything in it that the social media and communications teams would need. So that's just a snip of the comms toolkit. So it had all of the social media assets with a suggested caption. They had all of the social media kind of images that they could use. We put in website entries, we put press releases, we put all sorts in there. But basically the point was, we will give you everything that you need to run this campaign. We themed them in different kind of sections, I guess. So we had a duty of care section if people wanted to focus on a duty of care messaging. We had enforcement messaging so that each council could pick the bits that were most suitable for their residents, and it's worked brilliantly. So the previous campaigns that we've done that haven't been done in this kind of, how, I don't know, comprehensive I guess this toolkit was, councils haven't picked up the campaign as strongly as they have with this one. So if you are going to deliver a comms toolkit to them, I would suggest putting everything in that they could possibly need so that they don't really have to do anything. Then there's not so much of an excuse for them not to get involved, because it's just really easy. That was very quick, and I probably spoke for a little bit too long, but if you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat, or I can put my email address and you can email me afterwards. Thanks, Livvy.
Thank you, Natalie, and Livvy also. There's some outstanding insights and advice there. Really appreciate what you've shared. So yes, we do have a few questions. And the first one is relating to removal of domestic fly tipping and how that can normalise or excuse the behaviour. Is there any research suggesting an optimum response time to clearing fly tips? First question. And second, is a proactive or reactive removal considered to be more effective in changing behaviour? Any thoughts around that, Livvy, please?
Yes. So with the work that Keep Britain Tidy did, where they left the waste, in situ with the investigate tape on there, I think they left it. I said yes, so came in so strong. I think it's like 4 to 6 days where they had the under investigation on there, and what they found. So, and again, it is going to be dependent, but what they found in Birmingham when they did that was people actually started to take things away, interestingly. But what one of the challenges that local authorities have is that when you clear things immediately, you have then people know that things are going to get cleared very quickly. So one of the things when we were working with Essex, there was I can't remember which district council was. They had, I think their rate was like they could clear things within an hour. You know, they were so quick, they were so on it. But it was counterintuitive because actually that meant that who's going to pay for a bulky waste service that might take 3 or 4 days when within an hour things disappear. So one of the things they were going to look at was actually leaving it to see what would happen. Obviously, you've got the challenge if you leave things, then you have the broken window effect where more people pile it on. So it's a rock and a hard place, literally. But reinforcing that with the tape and seeing what works. So in the guide, I think it clarifies this. I think it's about 4 to 6 days. So that was the answer to the first question. What was the second part?
Whether a proactive or reactive response is considered more effective.
So I think the effective bit is making it clear that things are being investigated and that action is being taken. But this is the challenge which elected members have, because they like the proactive, keep it clean model. So where you're potentially going to have some tension is with your elected members. So saying, let's trial this, let's give it a go, let's see what happens. And one of the things that Birmingham did was Birmingham City Council is they went round and they did the tape and they went through people's doors. I mean, they put notices through people's doors saying, do you know about the bulky waste collection? And they had people calling up saying they'd never heard of it before. So this is the thing, it's you can't just do one thing. I probably didn't cover that off, but it needs to be probably a multi-pronged approach. So you acknowledge that something's happening and then you do things to enforce or to reinforce the ideal behaviours. So thinking about it in that sense.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's really helpful. There's one question. There's been quite a few mentions of displaced fly tipping, which I think has been really interesting. Do you know, on the example where you said that it was reduced by 83 to 100%, and I think that was the target hardening with the planters, if I remember correctly. Do you know in that instance whether that was displaced at all?
So that there is a whole, the fly tipping prevention group funded a load of different councils to do different initiatives, and planters and target hardening with beautification was in there. So there's multiple different examples that 83 to 100% came from. I would need to check whether in those instances there was displacement. So the answer is I'm not sure, but those were from multiple different places. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Sandy confirmed that the fly tipping actually increased by 11% when they introduced the free collections. So thanks for that, Sandy. A question regarding incentives for tenants, and I think you mentioned rewards for recycling. Are there any examples of where that has worked? Anybody got any information on that at all? Have you come across that, Livvy?
So I know from colleagues that have trialled kind of recycling incentive schemes that they haven't been effective, and people who tried it didn't want to carry it on. I always feel guilty about this because I know there's the Green Redeem people and other people, and they probably have got examples of where they have worked. So I would leave it to those people to say where it has or hasn't worked. The issue with incentives across the board with all behavioural science research on every type of incentive scheme is once the money stops, so does the behaviour. And so it's not driving a change in behaviour, and it's also changing the reason that people do it. So as long as you've got a pot of gold that you can keep giving money out from, or a way of funding it, think of that, consider that. But again, the first thing to understand is what is causing the behavior. So why is it that people aren't recycling? Is it because they need money to do it, or is it because it's inconvenient because they live in a flat? Is it because they need some other support? Is it because nobody in their local area recycles? Understand what the root cause is. Don't think that just if you give people money, it will change their behaviours, because convenience is king, and convenience quite often trumps money.
Yes. No, that's brilliant. Really important to clarify and draw attention to that. Caleb kindly shared some details of what's going on in Middlesbrough, and I'm glad that I now know how to spell Middlesbrough, because I'm not sure that I would have got that right before. Thank you for that, Livvy. Some great points about getting volunteers for fly tipping. Sorry, just flicking through these quickly because we're getting short for time. So one was about stencils, the messaging on the floor, whether people saw that as almost saying, hey, you can, this normalizes graffiti. I note that Kelly's kindly told us that it was chalk paint. People might not know that's chalk paint, of course. Has there been evidence of more graffiti as a consequence?
That's probably a question for Kelly and the team in Newham. I think the thing is, because it's chalk paint, it disappears, doesn't it, quite quickly? So it's very different. Yeah.
Good. And I think that's most of the points there. Anybody else want to come in with any questions at all?
So Emma's just said just at the end that they beautified a flower bed that was a fly tipping hotspot. Unfortunately, it didn't stop further dumping and further rubbish, just flattened all the plants. So that's an interesting one there, again, about understanding what's the root cause of the behaviour, and would it actually, is there a way to actually, so the other part of beautification is the target hardening. So could you actually make it harder for people to put things there? And also, trying to understand what is the route to that, and who is that audience who are doing it. So if it is young kids, maybe they don't feel any attachment to the local community, and maybe they're doing it because they think it's cool. Littering is there's a lot of, again, the motivation drivers are different for different groups, so understanding those is really important.
Yeah, that's good. And you say having a raised planter, for example, might be enough to make that difference between it than just getting damaged and not getting damaged. So that's a great point there. Thank you for that. Well, there's another question there on any evidence research on fly tip AI identification cameras to disincentivize. Have we any experience with that either, Natalie, Livvy?
I actually do. So not us personally, but as part of the working group, we've been doing kind of knowledge sharing sessions throughout the campaign. And our first one was around CCTV and the use of in fly tipping. Brentwood Council work with a private company who use AI technology for fly tipping and general littering in the car. So I can certainly, Zoe, if you drop me an email, I should be able to pop you in contact with Brentwood and I can't remember what the company's name is now, but I should be able to pop you in contact with them because they gave us a really good presentation about the cameras that they use and how effective they are in working to stop fly tipping, basically.
Thank you, Natalie. And if you are happy to drop it in the chat here, so that everybody can benefit from that, that would be excellent. That would be fantastic. Well, we're on our 12 o'clock. I think that's been awesome. Really appreciate, Livvy, Natalie, everything you've shared there. Huge thanks again, everybody that joined. It's been really insightful. I'd say particularly if you've got an interest in social housing and housing estates and looking for more solutions around that, please make sure you sign up for our event on 15th of May. There is a link there in the chat. So again, thank you. Really appreciate everyone's time today, and stay safe. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much. Take care.